Oh, baby. Nothing says casual Sunday like New York football, Giants, and whether or not Andy and I believe that there's a chance in the world, in the history of planet Earth, that the Giants could take on the Cowboys and actually get a win. He's Andrew Mackwitz. I'm Adam Marnbrecht. We always thank you as joining as we continue to get our season underway. Andy, we can take this any which way we want. One thing we didn't do yet was look back fondly at week one and what ultimately became a winning choice for you. Washington taking care of the New York football Giants. No one suspected 21-6 and ineptitude, as we like to say, for Big Blue offense.
Yeah, unfortunately, while I had the Commanders beating the Giants in a closely contested game, I don't think anyone really saw what was coming in that game where the Giants felt like it was last year all over again, where the quarterback doesn't look like it has the ability to have time to distribute it to his playmakers on the outside. Then you have the whole idea of the offensive line. I feel like Giant fans are getting PTSD, Adam, from the offensive line just not being able to do what it needs to do for years and years and years. And you just you pray that at this point, it's just one game and it's a one-off and it's not going to be a systemic issue that the Giants have to continue to address, because the Giants have thrown so many assets at the offensive line. And unfortunately, Andrew Thomas just can't stay healthy, but is great when he's on the field. John Michael Schmitz has not performed to his draft level. Evan Neal, in his rookie contract, has been benched and is now a second or third string guard. It just feels like if the Giants don't ever get the offensive line right, we're never going to see a functioning offense. And it doesn't really matter who's the quarterback at that point.
Yeah, I think it's been fun. And I think for the most part, like, I don't know, because at a high level, the Jaxson Dart draft and what it means for the season, like we talked about it last week, we'll talk about it all year, like, and we're going to talk about it today. Could we see him? There was questions asked, obviously, over the course of the week and packages and when he could play. But so I say that because I don't want to do what you unfortunately get forced to do when you talk about the Giants, which is like, yeah, this is a bummer. This is the worst. And yet, I think that the biggest takeaway for me coming out of week one was that there's a large segment of Giants fans, and even just in general on the radio and everywhere else, that fell into the conversation about, is it time for Jaxson Dart or not? Versus what you mentioned about the same problems remain the same problems through different GMs, through different head coaches. We still find ourselves having that same conversation. And it makes it hard to look at this team and look at that offensive line. You mentioned Andrew Thomas and his injuries. You look at those other four guys. I'll sum it up. The only thing I'm going to say about last week and about this O-line, we'll see how they play today. We'll talk about it. But when you go from a year ago, when Greg Van Roten gets brought in as a veteran, experienced backup, just in case offensive lineman, and then you come into 2025 and they go, you're our starter, that to me should have been an indicator about what the Giants did or did not accomplish in the offseason, how they feel about the offensive line maybe as we work our way through this year. And again, it's the first week of the season. So the one thing I'll say before we talk injury reports, and I know you're going to talk kind of on a high level about this team as well, I wanted to ask, do you look at it as, when you think about NFL teams, where they are coming out of preseason and training camp and going to the regular season, do you look at the Giants and say, we should give some wiggle room off of week one, knowing there's only 3 preseason games, there's not a ton of reps, Russell Wilson, maybe just getting comfortable, right? Getting live reps with everybody. How much wiggle room are the Giants on that spectrum of really good teams sorted out by weeks 4 or 5? Some teams just don't get that leeway when you've had a bad run in recent years.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I give the Giants 0. And maybe I'm a harsh critic, but I don't know. How did the Packers look the last 2 games? How did Micah Parsons look with like 5 minutes of like meeting his new teammates with the Green Bay Packers? Like, they look amazing. So
can I sidebar? Can I sidebar? Sorry, no, go ahead. I had a thought about watching that Green Bay game, but go ahead. Yeah.
Well, so maybe I'm going to steal your thunder here, but like that Green Bay game against the Commanders was just like a double gut punch for Giant fans, because it's like, man, we looked so far away from the Washington Commanders, and then the Washington Commanders looked so far away from the Green Bay Packers that like it felt like a loss for the Giants at that point, because you're like, man, we couldn't even compete in a division game. Imagine what happens when we go up against the upper echelon of the NFC. Like, to me, it was double as disappointing seeing the Commanders not perform well against the Packers. It just makes me think the Giants are so far off after we thought they would at least be competitive in most games.
Yes, I know it's blending from week one and then obviously to the Thursday night football. And it's fun. So I think the way I should have approached it, because I said the Giants could win week one. It didn't. It didn't work out. Andy, I want to be clear. But like I thought about it as what I really should have said was you want to see the Giants play against the Commanders as well as the Dallas Cowboys played against the Eagles. Right? You're in the mix. You think you have a chance to win the game. Maybe if not for a drop pass here, a couple of key plays, but play them tough so that you could signal we can be competitive this season, and maybe it's going to take us a little bit while to find that rhythm. Then you see the Commanders game against the Packers, and you go, okay, it's year 2 for Jaden Daniels. Their defense is going to have certainly some hard times against top teams. We know. I think a lot of people slept on Jordan Love and the injuries last year and what he went through versus like where should he be slotted in the QB class. Very impressive for them. So when you look at that game, you go, okay, it looks like Washington is still going to need the course of this season to figure themselves out and get to that top tier potential level. Where does that put the Giants? And I think I don't know if we brought it up or not last week. I think definitely talking in private where it was like the Giants right now, you have to slot them as one of the 3 worst teams in the league, probably coming off their week 1 performance, right? Some people say the Saints, some people say the Dolphins and what they put on the field in their week 1 against the Colts. And then it's the Giants. So that's difficult for me. But the sidebar about Micah Parsons, I just want to say is I never hated Micah Parsons. You dislike players that are on the Dallas Cowboys. The second that he took the field as a Green Bay Packer, it's a historic franchise, I just thought, and the way that he talked about the post-trade, and obviously he got paid and everything else, I just thought, well, that's an easy guy to root for. And he plays with such speed. He's so impactful in the game. And also represented obviously Green Bay and where they are in terms of what their goals are for the year. But it's like, oh, this one key choice we make and how it impacts our team. And I related to the Giants when they went and got Brian Burns last season, because those are 2 teams making kind of similar decisions about going and making a trade for a big name player, but 2 franchises that are in very different points, right? So you start to analyze the Giants kind of on those levels and like, yeah, Brian Burns is a great player and he can be very impactful, but when is the right time to make those kind of decisions? So there's a lot of things that connected from the Giants to the Commanders and then through that Thursday night game against Green Bay.
Yeah, Adam, I thought the same thing too. It's like, oh, Super Bowl caliber teams make the one that gets them over the hump. And that's what it felt like for Micah Parsons. For the Giants, they were acquiring a player and giving up draft compensation when the team is clearly very far away from being in that upper echelon. Yeah. And so that's really the frustrating thing. I think to put a bow on week 1, Adam, it could not have gone worse for the Giants, right? The offense looked terrible. Russ looked like he was scared, running for – he looked like Daniel Jones back there, like deer in headlights, ready to get sacked at any moment. The same issues popped up in week 1. Then you look at Daniel Jones with the Colts, and he almost wins NFC Player of the Week just like with how he played. It could not have gone worse for the Giants in week 1. But that is – yeah,
do you think for all of with the offensive line, do you think for all of the offseason that Russell Wilson came in the regular season like, no, I can't, especially without Andrew Thomas, like I can't trust this line? Because that was what that came out of week 1 was Russell Wilson was not trying to stay in the pocket, not trying to step up in it. He was trying to looking down, where are my feet going as I get out of here? Do you think like Russ came into that week 1 game saying like I have zero confidence? Because that's the debate about Russ is he's been on all these different teams over the last handful of seasons. I wonder where his confidence is when you think about trying to be effective as a quarterback. And then with some of his limitations, we know like his mobility in the pocket is not what it once was.
Yeah, listen, I also subscribe to the idea that you're never as bad as like your worst game. And that looked like an awful game for the offensive line. It looked like
that's the word again. That's too low.
Yeah, maybe I'm spinning it just to make myself feel better, and maybe
you're right. You're
doing the same thing. But we'll get to it later. But like the Dolphins, they looked awful. Like, do we think that the Dolphins are going to look that awful every single game? My hypothesis is no. But for the Giants, it's like you could not have looked worse on offense. The offensive line couldn't stop anyone from getting pressure on Russell Wilson. Russell couldn't extend the play or keep his eyes downfield to get it and distribute it to playmakers. Do I think that the Dallas Cowboys pass rush is going to do the same thing that the Commanders did? I do not. So I do think we're going to see a more functional offense today. What I will say is, and I was telling you before the show, I don't mean to be hyperbolic, but this could be the most important game for Joe Shane and Brian Daboll to date,
Oh, no.
because
Oh, boy.
it is either, Adam, it is
He didn't
either,
want to be hyperbolic,
I
but
didn't want to
he
be
will.
hyperbolic, but I'm putting it all on this one game. Now, the idea is, if week 1 was an anomaly and that the offensive line is slightly better, the team just needs to get in rhythm, Russ is fine, then we're going to see a functional offense and we're going to see the Giants be competitive. If the New York Giants aren't competitive today against the Dallas Cowboys, it opens up every single question that is completely fair game, to the point of, when should Jaxson Dart be able to get on the field? Is Brian Daboll the coach? Is Brian Daboll only riding on the coattails of what he did for Josh Allen 5 or 6 years ago? Does Joe Shane get that credit too? Like, I think it's fair to start asking some very, very tough questions. We did it towards the end of last season, like, should they stay or should they go? Literally, this game to me is the most important one, because it says, are we willing to be competitive and compete this year, or is everything that we feared over the last couple of years rearing its ugly head in week 2?
Yeah, the funny thing for me is, because last year coming into the season, the question was, could Brian Daboll and Joe Shane be separated from one another in terms of who stays or goes? And I think we were both on the same page. That's like, Joe Shane, I think, is safer, right? And then, but because that's the architect of your organization, versus if you feel like the head coach is improving himself, you can make that move. But coming out of week 1, to me, it's like, while I obviously wasn't impressed, and you want Brian Daboll and his coaching staff to be able to figure things out, you go, but if the offense, like, I can't. While I know Brian Daboll has input, I know that Brian Daboll pushed for Jaxson Dart to get drafted, right? We saw that in the draft coverage for the Giants. But I do know that Joe Shane is making the decisions about who they sign and how they construct this offensive line, who they draft. And so when I looked at the offensive line in week 1, I go, well, that flips the script here, which actually makes it worse. So to your point about, our job's on the line in week 2 here, is this the most critical game? I don't think it is, because you're not going to fire your GM in season. Like, I just don't see any world where the Giants are going to go down that road again. And a head coach, certainly possible. They're not historically a franchise that does that. And if things are going bad this year, I think that John Mara is just going to let it play itself out, because where are you going, right? We can talk about whether or not we think Shane Bowen maybe needs to, his job could be on the line in season. I think potentially, if you don't see the way the percentages of how many of those incredibly talented players were on the field together in week 1 and what they should be doing going forward. But I don't see it being that. I don't think it's the case. I think that is the safety net for Brian Daboll, and to some extent for Joe Shane, it's the Jaxson Dart draft pick, right? You draft Jaxson Dart, it means that until you see him, there won't be a referendum on how you feel about the head coach and how you feel about the GM necessarily going forward. The hard part about that is, I think that that's a delicate balance. Brian Daboll clearly believes in Jaxson Dart. Let's ask that question about what happens. We talk about packages and him doing everything and checking all the boxes. That's great. But to some extent, Brian Daboll is kind of feathering this line of, when I put Jaxson Dart in, he needs to, over a handful of games, not in his first drive, but he needs to look the part. So Brian Daboll needs to pick his spot to make that rookie quarterback convince ownership that, yes, we are going to be good going forward. I deserve a contract extension. I deserve to be here for multiple more seasons. That actually, I think, is what's fascinating about week over week. And if we start to get these little sample sizes, when Jaxson Dart was asked about, packages for you, he dismissed that and said, I'm just getting ready to play. Do you think that you think we're going to see that, like, in this game today, depending on how it goes? Do we see goal line maybe packages for Jaxson Dart? We see a couple of instances where they use his mobility in some capacity to try to help keep drives alive, and then say, yeah, like, you are we mentioned this last week, a Taysom Hill kind of thing in terms of just moving the chains for a handful of plays.
Well, I'm going to turn it back to you, and I'm going to answer your question with a question. Do you think it was in the offseason game plan that Jaxson Dart would be on the field in week 2 for the New York Giants?
No.
So if that wasn't the game plan, we've played 4 quarters of football, and we're already like, okay, all the things that we prepared for in this offseason, our entire game plan on how we're going to go do all this, let's throw it out the window because jobs are on the line right now. That's my problem, is like, if this is your game plan, I hope that we don't see Jaxson Dart today, because I want to see this game plan out for at least a handful of games. Give me 5 games, 6 games, because this was the plan that they sold every single person, that the Giants were going to be more competitive. Daniel Jones was the only problem. That's why he was the only free agent signing on the offensive side of the ball that we had. Now we're saying within 4 quarters, we're throwing that in all out, and we're saying, hey, the 23rd pick in the NFL draft is going to have to be our savior. Our jobs depend on it. That to me isn't a good plan, and it would show that the offseason strategy was so flimsy that all it takes is some headwinds going in one direction for the entire organization to shift, pivot, and change from what they thought they were going to be doing in week 3, 4, 5, etc.
Yeah, I think that's why it's a little bit confusing. We've heard the reports that the Giants coming out of New York is there's no pressure or impetus to say we need to get Jaxson Dart into this game. They want to be cautious. They want to be systematic about it. I think there's a plan in place, and I don't think that much is going to move them from that. So we'll get that other question that I have about today's game on the back end when we think about, could we see Jaxson Dart, though? Even if the plan is whatever, could we still see Jaxson Dart at some point? And maybe that fits into what the year-long plan was. And that's different from specifically having packages designed for Jaxson Dart to use him in week 2 versus getting a taste of it. One of the things I want to get into, obviously, when we talk about this matchup is where do we stand on a couple of these injury updates? So we'll start with just the Dallas side of things. It's a fairly short list for them. The cornerback Bland, he's out with a foot injury, didn't practice, so he won't be a part of it. Had 3 tackles in week 1 before going down. Then you have Hooker on a foot injury, a full participant for them, full participant for the other safety, Thomas, there as well. That's it in terms of their injury report updates for the New York Giants. You flip it over to the other side, a little bit longer of a list here. And I want to get, you can give me the catch-all here. You have Andrew Thomas. He's doubtful. I'm assuming, Andy, you may even have the update that he's officially going to be out for this game. I'm assuming he's going to be out. Nunez Roche, he also doubtful defensive line there. Then you got Wan'Dale Robinson, questionable with the ankle. He was a limited participation in their last practice. Had 8 targets, 6 catches, 55 yards a week ago for the Giants. Malik Neighbors, the back, he's dealing with it. Full participant. He's got that season long, I think, a little bit dinged up status. 5 catches on 12 targets, 71 yards a week ago. Here's one that they didn't hit on. We both talked about this bullishly in our bet segment, which we'll get to today. Wide receiver Darius Slayton, groin, limited participation in practice. He did not come down with the over on yardage a week ago. No catches. That's what makes it hard. And then, as we know, McFadden kind of avoided what could have been a more serious concern there. The foot, he didn't participate, only had 2 tackles before going down early last week. There's also Dexter Lawrence listed here. But on the McFadden front, I will note, Okereke said, I think maybe it was Brian Burns. He's critical to what we do. And I thought about it specifically when we talk about run defense for the New York Giants. McFadden is like a point A to point B, a straight line bullet shot to fill those gaps in. And the Giants don't really have that type of one-to-one backup replacement for him. Give me your thoughts, Andy, as we talk about the injury reports on both sides.
Yeah, it's tough. It seems like Darius Slayton's going to go. It seems like Wan'Dale Robinson's going to go. It looks like Nunez Roche will not participate today. Dan Duggan of The Athletic put out a couple minutes ago that he's projecting Andrew Thomas to be out as well today. But there's no official word yet from the Giants on that. It's tough because I feel like the Giants used some of these injuries as excuses to be able to say, well, we don't have our full team out there, or we don't have our left tackle, or now Micah McFadden is not there. What is the defense supposed to look at like without Micah McFadden? Adam, there's just I am so tired of the excuses of the Giants saying well, if we just had X, we would be Y. It's no longer will that be acceptable to me. It's you know that Andrew Thomas has an injury history. So if he does, you have to plan accordingly and expect him to be out 3 or 4 games for the season. What does the team look like? It can't look like what it did against the Commanders. And they point to, well, if we had Andrew Thomas, it'd be different. Micah McFadden is arguably the 6th or 7th most important person on the defense, right? If you were to go down the list, it's you have Burns, you have Dexter Lawrence, you have Thibodeau, you have Paulson Adebo, you have Javon Holland, you have all Bobby Okereke, you have all of these different players that probably are more important than Micah McFadden. So when they're oh man, you don't understand how important it is to not have Micah McFadden. Yes, he's a good player, but the Giants still need to be a competent defense without their 6th or 7th best player on defense. To me, maybe I'm just jaded from how bad week 1 looked, but I'm there's no more excuses. You can't just say if we had one more extra thing that the Giants would be competitive, because they haven't been competitive in years now, Adam.
Yeah, and again, that's why week 1 is rough, and why you look at it and you say Oh, yes, McFadden goes down. Yes, you don't have Andrew Thomas. But again, and I think too, like when we go back to last week and we'll bring it forward, it's like, what do we expect from the offensive line this game, right? What do I expect from Tyrone Tracy Jr.? Like there was a lot of individual performances, and you tie it back to the way that the offensive line looked. But there's a lot of individual things that you look across the board and go, it was more just that you didn't see those moments from a lot of players, right? Like you didn't see the same thing on the defensive side of the ball you maybe thought. Brian Burns played an excellent game, but where was XYZ, right? By the way, call back to Thursday night when I saw Xavier McKinney playing, and I just went down that whole road. It's like you have to just find Javon Holland in the offseason. Why? Because you didn't want to keep your own drafted player that was really good. Giants sometimes make bad choices even when they make good choices. So that is the hard part for me. It's that you looked across that line and said, you had, and then by the way, even bringing in Hudson and saying he's our backup because we know we have an injury risk in Andrew Thomas, and he didn't look so good. Now, on that front, I can't bust the chops here because offensive linemen are hard to come by. Backup offensive linemen are hard to come by. And yet, a lot of teams around the league find a way to manage one or two key injuries. And maybe even more critically, when you feel like you only have that one really solid box checked, that's what makes it hard because you can't turn to another player on your offensive front. I think it's probably who would you say is the turn to player? I know Greg Van Roten, veteran, leadership there, but who do you look to across the line and say, you need to be that anchor point for us without Andrew Thomas to make sure that we feel like we have that cohesive kind of sense across that line?
Well, I'll give you two answers. One is it feels like it's Jermaine Illuminor just because he's been in the league for a while. He's actually been competent at his position, but it should be right. John Michael Schmitz. Like that's who it should be. It should be the center stabilizing everything. A second round draft pick at the center position. I mean, think about how silly the debate was that we had like a while ago where I was like, we can't draft interior linemen that early. And it's like, well, what if it's a can't miss guy like John Michael Schmitz? And then lo and behold, he is a can miss prospect and turns into a guy that's a liability across the offensive line. Our center in year 2 or year 3 should be better. He should be able to continue to progress, and it doesn't feel like he has. That is the problem that the Giants have, is that they've allocated resources and they've done the scouting. It has not panned out. So to me, I'm looking at JMS today and saying, you need to be a stable force in front of Russell Wilson and stop giving up so many pressures right up the middle.
Let's take a look at, I want to talk about who we want to see have an impact today, and we can also relate it back to the stats of week 1 and then combine it with some of the snap counts that we saw last, right? I want to go to the running back room. Tyrone Tracy Jr. plays 74% of snaps, 15 for Devin Singletary, 12 for Scadaboo, who had a couple of like nice moments, right? When he catches the ball out in the flat, he wants to lay wood. He only had 2 carries for -3 yards. I do want to discuss that in some ways. Receiving, it was that 2 catches for just on 2 targets for just 12 yards. He also had a nice pickup block on blitz coming in when he was in the backfield alongside Russell Wilson. For Tyrone Tracy Jr., 10 catches, 24 yards. Again, a lot of issues around the offensive line. We saw him have 2 catches on 5 targets for just 11 yards. There seems to be this sentiment about looking at Tyrone Tracy Jr., the drafted Scadaboo, like, hey, you got to get this guy in there. He needs to ramp it up. While I love, and this is why you love him when they drafted him, I love what Cam brings in terms of when the ball touches his hands, he's going to try to physically abuse someone in some form or fashion. When the ball doesn't touch his hands, he's going to try to physically abuse someone in some form or fashion. And also, when he gets caught behind the line, like he looks as susceptible to that as any running back the Giants have had. And he also, like, he doesn't have that breakaway speed. Tyrone Tracy Jr. does have that. How do you look at that backfield? Because I still looked at this thing, especially early in the season. Tyrone Tracy Jr. needs to be the lead back to find a way. As long as you get those fumbling issues he had a year ago, he can pass catch, he can run the ball, he can hit you a home run. The Giants need to find a way to give him those seams to go ahead and get you some of those big plays this week.
I couldn't agree more with you, Adam. Like Cam Scadaboo looked great and looked physical, and you like to see that toughness. He feels more like a spark than he does a consistent guy that you're going to be relying on constantly. The yards, the -3 yards, not a good look for him. To me, you're absolutely right. Tyrone Tracy Jr. needs to have a big game today. Everyone's talking about Russ and Russ having more time, but the Giants could not get anything going running the football. And that is on the offensive line, but it also is on Tyrone Tracy Jr. He needs to be able to step up and be that force that can get 4 or 5 yards a carry for the Giants so that we are in 2nd and 4 and 3rd and
Sure.
2, so that Russ isn't having to drop back in predictable passing situations. Adam, I was going to say my favorite bet for the Giants
Oh,
today is Tyrone Tracy Jr. to score a touchdown. It's plus 140. You're
yeah.
getting better than even money on that. It feels like the Giants know they have to establish the run. You heard all the comments about it was really weird that inside the 5-yard line, we just had Russ dropping back and throwing all these passes. They were all critical of the game plan and the script to be able to pass inside the 5. The Giants need to be able to win at the line of scrimmage, and Tyrone Tracy Jr. is going to be that catalyst. So for me, I am fully on board with your idea. Devin Singletary, change of pace back. Cam Scatterbo is a spark plug that can get you going, get the guys amped up. But Tyrone Tracy needs 15 to 18 carries today, has to get 70 to 80 yards, and I expect him to get in the end zone.
Oddly enough, for all of the all the conversation around Russell Wilson's not as mobile as he used to be, he did have 8 carries, scrambles for 44 yards. Like he moved the ball a little bit, right? 74 total rushing yards for the Giants on the day last week. I want to flip it over to the next big one for me offensively and jump in anywhere that you saw something. But when you talk about Theo Johnson, I mean this was a bummer of a game for him a week ago. 78% of the snaps, 26 went to Manhurts, obviously more of a blocking tight end for the Giants, and then 22%, 15 snaps for Daniel Bellinger. But it was notable, and many fans brought this up. Yeah, but when I see Daniel Bellinger get one target, get one catch, 14 yards, and get the Giants down into a goal line situation, and I see Theo Johnson on some of those flats, it's hard because when the offensive line doesn't hold up, Theo Johnson's greatest value with his size and working up the seam gets diminished greatly. But Theo Johnson looked like he had brick for hands, so that was a real bummer. He keeps dropping the passes. Daniel Jones makes that one key catch. Bellinger, excuse me, Daniel Jones. And you think about this, another drafted tight end, and that conversation happened so much about what happened to Bellinger. Why aren't they more confident in him? He had the injury, everything else. Know that. Do you think that maybe lessons learned? You say we look back room, it still needs to be Tyrone Tracy Jr.'s day. Do you think when you combine that with the snap counts in the wide receiver room, obviously Slayton 97%, Neighbors 94%, Wandale 76%. That's it. Bo Collins had 2 reps last week. After that, it was into the wide receiver room, the tight end room, and bringing those guys into play. So if you're only going to run primarily 3 wide receivers, these 2 tight end sets and Manhurt's getting used, I wonder if we see a little bit more trust potentially with Russell Wilson saying, hey, in a couple of key spots here, I need to try to utilize Daniel Bellinger to move the chains if our offensive line is going to have some of these struggles.
Yeah, I mean, I'll turn it back to you with a simple question. Right now, as it stands, who do you trust more, Theo Johnson or Daniel Bellinger?
Yeah, right now it's Daniel Bellinger. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Right. And that's not to take anything away from Theo Johnson's upside, because that's all we're hearing is he's a great athlete for his size. It's unbelievable. But you pointed out there were a couple of those dumps in the flats that he's just dropping balls. And the Giants can't be behind down and distance to be able to be a competent offense. And we need him to be able to secure the ball. We know he's not a great run blocker. So if he's dropping passes and he's not helping in situational football, then we have to get Daniel Bellinger out there to be able to handle that. So I mean, much like my adoration of Daniel Jones probably lasted a little too long, my adoration for Daniel Bellinger is still there. Maybe I'm the only one on that island, but to me, when he got in the game, I was like, oh, this is what competency looks like. This looks like a guy being able to catch balls, understands I have to be able to block aggressively. I have to be able to make plays when I'm called upon for the 3 or 4 times a game that we're going to be leveraging the tight end position. I'd like to see more Daniel Bellinger out there. I am totally fine with maybe the snap share changing a little bit to give a little less time to Theo Johnson. I don't know if his explosiveness over the seam is necessarily what this game calls for. I think we need someone with sure hands that can continue to help make the offense look functional.
And in that regard, no Jalen Hyde in week 1 shouldn't be surprising to anybody. It's why Darius Slayton didn't have a lot of action. When the offensive line is struggling, developing those vertical routes is a lot harder. It's why Wandale Robinson had the day he did. We have confidence in Wandale, but that's part of it. Got to get the ball out of your hands as fast as you can, and that makes it more difficult when we talk about those route trees. So it's something to consider. If we talk about flipping it over to the defensive side of the football, there's a few things here. Number one concern for me is if you don't have Mike McFadden in this game and you're talking about Muasau, I mean, listen, it's not a knock on him, but he came in and it was like, well, we're going to pick on you first and foremost. There's a couple of plays, right? It's a big drop off there at that position. That's depth. That's okay. But it's just worth noting with the McFadden. The other part that I found interesting was, we'll get into the, don't worry, we're going to get into the pass rushers here. But Dexter Lawrence played 70%. Robertson Harris played 67%. Nunez Roche played 46%. DJ Davidson played 21%. Garcia even played 9%, just 6 snaps. But they really got deep in terms of defensive tackles. Let's talk about Shane Bowen and having all of these weapons and game plan that they came out with. When you see, not surprising that, Kayvon Thibodeau, 52 snaps, 74%, that makes sense to me, right? But Brian Burns is out there for 67. Abdul Carter, 54. He's a rookie. It's his first game. Golston, 16. And then we get into that linebacker room. There's a lot going here. But what jumped out to you defensively? And maybe he is, along with Kafka, along with Brian Dable, right? It's like, what's the game plan here? The strength of our defense is all these guys we can get after the quarterback with. And I noted coming out of that Washington game, big physical bodies like Washington set their defensive front with would be impactful. It can be tricky when you're working with speed primarily as your weapon. And if quarterbacks get the ball in their hands quickly, that can offset what you want to do early in games.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. As you start rifling off names like Garcia and Davidson and Chauncey, I'm like, was this the game plan? Was this the strategy that we went into the season with? Like, everyone has talked about how formidable the pass rush is with Brian Burns, Abdul Carter, Kayvon Thibodeau, but they haven't found a way yet to get them all on the field consistently. And that leaves a glaring hole next to Dexter Lawrence. And you're talking about guys that are on practice squads that we're pulling up that are starting games for the Giants. It feels like at some point the Giants are going to have to take a long, hard look at reallocating resources to be able to have more competency next to Dexter Lawrence. It's the word that I keep coming back to, Adam, is competency. Like, the Giants didn't look functional on offense. The defense did not look competent. They gave up 200 yards on the ground. And that's because they don't have anyone that they truly trust to be able to stop the run next to Dexter Lawrence. To me, it's like, at some point, the Giants are going to have to look at trading someone like Kayvon Thibodeau in order to get some more defensive line help and letting Brian Burns and Abdul Carter play 80% of the snaps, right? Like, to me, you have to reallocate the resources accordingly. You have 3 great pass rushers right now. You need at least one good defensive tackle to stop the run next to Dexter Lawrence. To me, it's all about reallocating assets. I don't think the Giants can do it on the fly with the team that they have. When we're talking about promoting guys off the practice squad, I feel like they're going to have to make a material change in order for Shane Bowen's system to work, because right now it's just not working.
Yeah, I mean, listen, combining with Kayvon Thibodeau, the Giants they have 40 million, north of 40 million between Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns on the defensive side. Then you add in Bobby Okereke with $14.5 million, right? So that's 55 million. Go ahead and drop Dabo, who they brought in. Now you're up to 65 million. You put Kayvon Thibodeau in there, 70. They've got the money invested. And to your point, it's just, how are you spending that money? And then you also have Abdul Carter, obviously, in the mix there, and what he's going to be, right? So I find that part of it fascinating. And I'm going to come back into and say, there's not a lot of reps. You don't get a lot in the season. So some of these things are based on, like, you need to keep guys fresh early in the year. And I actually was going to do that legwork when we flip it over to the defensive side for the Dallas Cowboys. And you say, now they have a lot of different players that they can use, but their defensive front spread it out. Nobody played more than 62% of the reps. 3 guys were in that 35 and 45% of the reps territory. So I found that interesting. Notable that defensively for the New York Football Giants, Javon Holland and Tyler Nubin played 100% of the snaps on the back end. Dave Belton was sprinkled in there. Likewise, when we talked about offensively, you're having that conversation on the same side of that cornerback room for the Giants. You only get Deonte Banks on there for 11 snaps. It's 100% for Adebo. It's Cordell Flott for 84. He got picked on a bit. 83 for Drew Phillips. So they mixed and matched there in terms of trying to build that out, putting a lot more reps into their front 7 and the linebacking core. But that's who it's going to be. Like, these are the horses you're running with this week. When we think about matchups, what are a couple of your most critical on both sides of the ball, the Giants against Dallas?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the fact that Deron Bland, all-pro cornerback, is out for the Cowboys, you look at it and say, is Trayvon Diggs going to follow around Malik Neighbors? I look at Darius Slayton again, and I'm like, You are getting paid to be a wide receiver number 2. You are getting the full breadth of snap counts. You mentioned it before. Those are the guys that we are seeing out there. Bo Collins got a cup of coffee for a minute. You're making $13 million a year. Whoever is going to be lined up alongside Darius Slayton, he has to win that matchup, and he has to win it consistently, Adam. Like, there's just no getting around it, because to me, I keep going to like allocation of resources. He is your wide receiver number 2. He is now being paid wide receiver 2 money. He has to be able to perform. And listen, I watched some of the clips from the Commander game. There were times where he did get separation. He was open,
Yes,
and Russ
yes.
could not hit him down the field. It's not for a lack of effort. It's not for a lack of skill or athleticism or speed. He lost a step. It's nothing like that. It's he needs to find a way to impact the game. It can't just be, well, the quarterback was really struggling. It's like, how do we get him more involved? Maybe it's Mike Kafka play calling. Maybe it's different design and scheme for him. But to me, you're gonna, Malik Neighbors is going to get the ball 6 to 8 times minimum this game. But we can't have Darius Slayton having 0 catches. Like that just to me is unfathomable for how important he is to this team. I mean, would you agree that Darius Slayton's more important than Wan'Dale Robinson in this game? He has to be able to be explosive on the opposite side of Malik Neighbors.
Yeah, when you look back at the stats from a week ago, you say, "Oh, it's a nice game for Wan'Dale. Nice game for." I mean, Malik Neighbors needs to be the number one. We get that, but it's like, yeah, that's nice, but it's because there are these little chunk plays. You need to have the ability to on a given play have, as you mentioned, whether it's Darius Slayton on the over, on a slant out over the middle that's around that 7 to 12 range that goes for 15 to 20, or it's one of those routes straight down the sideline. If you can't open up the top of the defense, I mean, like NFL 101 offense, but if you can't open up the top of the defense and do it without your number 1 wide receiver, right? If you want to call Darius the number 2, even if he's the number 3rd weapon in terms of target shares, you need to be able to hit one of those big passes so that they cannot double team Malik Neighbors all game long and throw a safety shadowing over the top, right? You need to find a way to have consistency in the run game so that Russell Wilson doesn't have to be under siege, so that you don't have the linebackers creeping up. Like at a certain point, you're saying, yeah, we'll go ahead and have a second set of eyes on Neighbor. That'll make it impossible for the Giants to look to him. And if you can't crack the some other way, you're in a world of hurt. I will flip it over defensively here when we talk about the Giants. Because again, if you go back to last week for the Dallas Cowboys, Dak Prescott had 21 to 34, 188 yards, 5.5 yards per pass play. The Giants defense in this moment cannot be compared to the Eagles defense and what they're capable of. And yet, you look at Javonte Williams, 15 for 54. Miles Sanders, 4 for 53. They end up running for 119 total. That is the Giants' weakness. It was weak against the Commanders in the first game of the season. It's going to be the focal point here, because the biggest problem coming out of that week 1, among the many of them, is the Giants functionally, with the way their defense is constructed, cannot succeed playing from behind. They cannot succeed playing down multiple scores. That speed rush needs to have the Giants be in the game, or maybe, dare I say, leading a game 7-3 or 10-7, so that when you get on there defensively, you force the quarterback to have to stay in the pocket, to try to develop those bigger routes and let those speed pass rushers get there. So my number one concern here is, how do you stop the run early in the game, force the Cowboys into passing situations, and allow, we believe in our safety play. We know our cornerback room is suspect, but okay, allow yourself to scheme some opportunities to get them into 3rd and longs, and then continue again to get after them with your pass rush. So shutting down the run early in this one is going to be critical. I was impressed with the Dallas run game. New running back room entirely there, really, for them. That's going to be my number one thing to watch here, is look at this matchup.
It's funny that you say that, because the Cowboys script against the Eagles is exactly how I would think that the Giants would want to play on offense, right? You have one explosive wide receiver that you're going to try to get the ball to consistently. You have a quarterback that needs to just functionally work the offense, and you rely on the run game as heavily as you can to kind of drain the clock, play the time of possession game, make sure that you give the other explosive offense less opportunities to be on the field. Javonte Williams, I think Warren Sharp put all the stats out. Javonte Williams had the least yards after contact of anyone in the NFL. He had 0 explosive plays. Like, he did nothing spectacular. He didn't even average 4 yards a carry, but his impact was felt. Like, it felt like every time he was getting a couple of consistent yards to be able to allow the passing game to do what they needed to do. Like, the blueprint of what the Cowboys did against the Eagles is exactly what I think the Giants need to be able to do against those Cowboys is give a healthy dose of Tyrone Tracy, make sure that he's getting at least 3 or 4 yards per carry. He needs 15 carries in this game, and you want Russell Wilson to look somewhat like Dak Prescott in terms of getting the ball out to your playmakers when you need it. So for me, it's kind of ironic that like this script that the Cowboys played against the Eagles in week 1 is exactly what I think is what Mike Kafka and the offense should be doing to try to be competitive in Dallas today.
Yeah, and if you go back and look those first 2 drives for Dallas a week ago, it was 4 out of their 6 plays on their opening drive touchdown were run plays. They had a couple penalties sprinkled in against the Philadelphia Eagles as well. And when you get into that second quarter, it's the same kind of script. And it's this balance, 3-yard run, 18-yard pass, 5-yard run, 3-yard run, 26-yard pass, right? A couple penalties sprinkled in again, but it was the balance of hitting the Eagles with a couple of consistent run plays and then popping off that opportunity over the top. Need to find a way to flip that script on the offensive side of the football for the Giants as well. Prediction time.
Well,
let's
Adam,
talk about the betting.
Just want to make sure that you know the inactives have come out for the Giants.
Oh,
Andrew
no.
Thomas is inactive today, so just wanted to make sure that's known. Thomas Vadone is out. Flanagan Fowles, who we knew, I don't think he even traveled with the team. Xavier Gibson, who was just acquired from the Jets to help in special teams and kick return, he is out today. Evan Neal's inactive. Nunez Roche is inactive. And Jameis Winston is the emergency QB. So no Andrew Thomas. So we absolutely need the Giants to be able to figure out that offensive line without their most impactful offensive lineman.
Quick shout out to Jameis Winston, who, when asked about being the third quarterback, and everyone didn't circulate it, but it was just, they gave the perfect answer. It was, yep, don't care if I'm 33 or 3, I'm 19 for the first time. My job is helping Russell Wilson, helping Jaxson Dart, preparing if needed to be called upon. It's exactly what you want in the room. And I'm just going to say it now because I said it in the offseason. The Giants just should have signed Jameis Winston, let him be the starter, and have Jaxson Dart be the QB in waiting. And that's not a knock on Russ. That would have been fine. I don't think we would think about the season any differently if it had just been him, but I like the way he's carrying himself. Okay, hit us with prediction time. Where do we stand on the betting line? Where did it open? Where has it gotten to? And which way are you going?
Yeah, so Adam, there hasn't been as much movement in this line as many people would think. Right now, the Giants are 4.5-point underdogs in Dallas. It's been anywhere between 4.5 and 5 points, so just under a touchdown. So the Giants are
that's only like that's like a 1.5, 2-point neutral site game. Which I think is insane based on how close the Dallas Cowboys played the Philadelphia Eagles in week 1.
I mean, I look at that line, and if I was not a Giant fan, or we did not host a podcast that was specifically geared towards the Giants, I'd be like, something's wrong with this line. Like they haven't figured it out. It feels like this line should be 7.5, not 4.5. But what do I know? I'm just a layman over here. But Adam, like I said, it's 4.5 right now. The over/under is at 44.5. Is there any opening thoughts that you have on that? Right now, about 70% of all of Vegas money is going in on the Cowboys, and deservedly so, because they at least looked more competent than the Giants did in week 1.
Yeah. The Giants haven't beaten the Dallas Cowboys since 2021, if I'm reading correctly. People know that. They're 9-1 in the last 10 games against them. My first thought is the New York Football Giants offense put up 6 points against the Washington Commanders defense in week 1. Whatever Dallas is or is not, I think their defenses aren't totally dissimilar in terms of expectations for the year with Washington. So when you have a 44.5 over under and a team that only scored 6 points and the opposition that put up 20 and could more against the Eagles, I know the line says 4.5, but it smells like if you want to take the over, you're looking at it and saying, watch out. This is, 27-14 Dallas, a garbage touchdown maybe for the Giants. It feels like this would be blowout territory if you wanted the over. If we're going to talk about this, has to be under for the Giants if you want to think they're going to be in this game in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's inconceivable for anyone to be like, the Giants are putting up 30 points today on offense, right? Based on what we've seen so far, there's no indications that the Giants have an explosive offense until further notice. So for me, I'm right there with you. The Giants need to muck this game up. They gotta kill the clock. They gotta play possession. They gotta limit the amount of times that the Dallas offense is on the field. And if it's a 13-10 game, it feels like the Giants are in it till the bitter end, obviously. If we get into a shootout, that's not a place that the Giants can operate today, right?
No. The Giants had a 16-play, 76-yard drive that ended up with a field goal when it was 7-3 in the second quarter. If you take that away, the Giants had 150 yards of total offense for the rest of the game. They had 231 total yards. Washington had 432. So in some ways, like Washington took a while to get into that game last week. The touchdown, the final score doesn't even really kind of tell you how controlled that was, even though the defense fought valiantly. If the Giants are going to win this game or have a chance to win this game, it's so hard in the NFL today to say you got to win this thing 17-14. You got to win, you got to win this thing 20-7. I mean, maybe 20-17 is the most reasonable as we talk about, real numbers here if you want them to win. But the Giants defense has to do with it against Washington and then not give up that touchdown in the fourth, right? Which is a lot, but you had 14 points into the fourth quarter. You did it. You held Washington to 2 scores. Can you do the same thing to Dallas? Big advantage for them is Dak is not a mobile quarterback the way that Jaden Daniels is. So I do have confidence that this defense is capable of getting you to the fourth quarter and still having it be no more than 10-17 points put up potentially for the Dallas Cowboys. Do you believe that's achievable for this unit when you think about those missed opportunities with CD Lamb a week ago that could have had that game look differently? Remember, big delay in that game because of the storm, and that shut all of the offensive production down for both teams in that game.
Yeah, Adam, it's difficult for me to think about how the Giants. I'm more concerned about the Giants offense than I am the Giants defense. To your point,
yes, that's
the
a good
defense
point.
at least kept them in the game into the fourth quarter. You've given up 14 points. You're saying, hey, score 10, score 14, score 17. We're at least alive and we're putting some pressure on the opposing quarterback. I do think it's going to be interesting the fact that Dak doesn't have the same mobility as Jaden Daniels. When the Giants get their pass rush going, this is the type of quarterback they may be able to take advantage of because he's not mobile. He's not going to be a guy extending plays with his legs unless it's absolutely necessary. And so for me, I think this bodes well for the Giants in terms of the defense. I do believe the Dallas offense is better than the Giants offense right now. I mean, we saw it in week 1. Yeah, how disruptive can the pass rush be? Can they cause a huge turnover that flips the game on its head? To me, that's the only way that the Giants stay in this game is if Abdul Carter or Brian Burns gets in the backfield and causes a turnover, Dak to throw it fast, to fumble, etc. Because the Giants need to have one of those game-flipping plays in order to be able to stay competitive in this. I don't think if we just say, hey, we're a boxer and we're going to go knockout for knockout, that the Giants are going to be able to keep up with Dallas. So for me, it has to be to rely on the defense. It has to be burn the clock. It has to be keep this game low scoring. And then hopefully you get that one critical break in the third or fourth quarter that really flips the game on its head.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's what
you're like, what else can be said? Like that is the only pathway forward. To suggest the Giants can win this game 30-27 is like you've been watching a different team, different offense, different coaching staff, and you didn't watch week 1, and you still have this eternal optimism that the Giants are a different team than what we know and love. And so for me, Adam, I'll give my first prediction on this game. You've heard us talk about it. I think the Giants have to rely on Tyrone Tracy. I said him to score a touchdown at plus 140 feels like the best bet on the board if you're going to be cheering for the Giants. To me, I said it in week 1, like I just am not going to be burned by this team until I actually see what we think they can be play out in real life. To me, I think the Giants are going to be a little bit more competitive. I just don't think it's going to be enough in this game. I think the defense is going to show well. I think the offense is going to have a lot of the same questions we had in week 1. To me, I'm looking at this being a low-scoring affair, but the Giants aren't going to be able to pull it out. I have the Giants losing to the Cowboys 20-10 in this game because I just don't see the Giants scoring 2 touchdowns until I actually see it with my own 2 eyes.
Yeah, that feels right. Like that feels Giants-esque, right? The Giants, by the way, they've put up no more than 20 points against the Dallas Cowboys all the way back to 2021, the 23-19 victory that they had against Dallas. After that, they've never gotten over 20. We know the big blowout 40-0 to start the 2023 season, 17 points, 15 points. So, and by the way, it's like This wasn't against stalwart defenses of the Dallas Cowboys. Nevertheless, Andrew, like you say, you start the first week of the season. Nobody maybe is as good as they maybe looked at first week. No one's as bad as they look. I think we know the Giants aren't going to be a great team, but I think that there is something critical here. To go back to the top where you said, are there jobs on the line? No, there are not jobs on the line. But also, I think the season and how we talk about this team is on the line. You lose this game, and we know what the conversation is going to be. I think the defense played incredibly well against the Washington Commanders. I think if the offense can be even marginally productive, and I think if you're Kafka and you're Dable, you better have spent this last week really having a conversation about how you figure out getting some big play opportunities, getting everybody involved. So I will be scorned. I'm going to keep being scorned until this team throws me into the dirt and pours it over my head like Step Brothers, just bury me alive. 17-6 New York Football Giants get the victory. I ask very little. I ask for 17 offensive points and holding the Dallas Cowboys to 3 field goals on the day, giving up a touchdown, maybe being up 7-3 into the second quarter, allows the defense to be productive. I want to earn. I want to be faithful this year. I want to be optimistic, Andrew. And that's what I'm going to do. I think the goal line situations have to look different. Remember, Giants were down there. Giants had 79 plays inside the 2-yard line a week ago and could not score. So for whatever it's worth, they did get there. And they didn't get any points because they were going for it on 4th down. Even if it had been 13-21, that game could have felt a little bit different. So I'm going to say the Giants execute in the red zone. They hold off Dallas. This is way too low of a number, but 17-16 Giants at least give us something to be excited about here. Bonus offering, Andrew, do you think Jaxson Dart is in this game at any point in any capacity?
I do not think Jaxson Dart gets in the game at all, barring a Russell Wilson injury. Obviously, just throw that caveat out there, but I don't think it's in the game plan for Jaxson Dart to start. If at some point we see Jaxson Dart come in, it's not going to be a good thing for the Giants. That's the way I think about it in my head. It's like the only way he comes in is if things are going horribly wrong. It's not like if the Giants are, up 21-10, they're like, let's just throw Jaxson Dart in and muck this whole thing up. It's like, no, The only way that he gets on the field is if there's real problems with Russell Wilson. So I am hoping that we don't see him in this game. Eventually, obviously, we want to see what he's got maybe later on in the season.
Remind everybody, too, you gave picks last week away from the New York Football Giants matchup 2-0 for Andrew Makowitz starting out. So you're going to want to perk up your ears and put a couple shekels down on these.
I did. I took the Buffalo Bills, who came back in dramatic fashion. So kudos to me for betting on Josh Allen. That seems like a pretty prudent bet. The other one was I really liked the Oakland Raiders going on the road to the New England Patriots. I just felt the injuries to the offensive line and for New England were just going to be too much. And Pete Carroll's a functioning coach, and Geno Smith is a good quarterback, and Ashton Genty's a good runner. Just felt like all of those things were lining up. My favorite game outside of the Giants game today, we talked about it earlier. You're never as bad as you look in one single game. To me, it's the Miami Dolphins. I am taking the Miami Dolphins minus 2.5 at home against the Patriots. This just has the writing of like everyone's written them off. They're the worst team in the league. How horrific could they be? And then all of a sudden, a funny thing happens when they get back to Miami. And Tyreek Hill catches a big pass, and Devin Achane goes nuts and has a 125-yard game. I can't even believe this line is as low as it is at minus 2.5. Adam, give me the Dolphins. I just believe this is a huge bounce back game for them.
You got it. 2 big picks from Andrew Makowitz. Listen, we gotta track this stuff. I mean, hopefully it continues to go well. So it looks like we're building with confidence. But Andy's usually pretty good at these things. I think last season, had you bet along with them, you came out on the positive side of the ledger, especially in a couple of moments like these, picking games, picking those lines. We'll be back, boys. We're coming up on 12 p.m. Means you got 1 hour left. You get some dogs going, a couple of brewskis. You put the baby down. You kick the wife out, or have her join in. We're not excluding anybody here. We get ready for a game. Hopefully, unlike the season opener, the New York Football Giants give fans something to stay involved in, because it only took about 7 seconds last week. Be like, well, maybe I should go for a walk. And in case you're wondering, I did. I watched the whole stupid thing before I went out and met up with a few friends to try to take my mind off of it. So we'll look for Big Blue to turn things around. Give fans something to be excited about. Brian Dable, Kafka, Shane Bowen. Everybody has to be better this week. We'll come back in after it all down and see whether or not the New York Football Giants could be, by the way, with a win, tied for second place in the division. That's all I know about anything. We'll be back next time talking all things New York Football Giants. But as Andrew Mackwoods would want, need, and nay, demand the people know.
As always, let's go Big Blue.